Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. Today, Karlie, a sports chiropractor and CrossFit trainer and mom of two, joins us to talk about all things high level fitness in pregnancy and postpartum. And you know what? This is applicable to everybody, regardless of your fitness level. She and a colleague has also created a company that has an amazing sports bra with no clips, no Velcros, no snaps, so you can get back into your activities in a way that feels good and comfortable, but you're still able to feed or pump for your baby. So we'll get to that right after this quick reminder.
Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are doctors Sarah and Alicia, maternity physicians and moms who have been through it all. We want to empower you with knowledge so you can have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience you can.
She Found Health and She Found Motherhood is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This information does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or another qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Health and She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any of the institutions with which we are affiliated. Some of our podcast episodes are sponsored so that we can keep getting great info out there to you, our listeners. We only partner with companies that we truly believe in. Some of our links and suggestions may be affiliates, and we would appreciate you using them to help fund this important work. Now let's get to it.
Karlie, welcome. Today, we're going to chat a little bit about exercise and fitness going into pregnancy, how we can adjust, especially in those high intensity exercises like CrossFit and HIIT workouts and strength building throughout the pregnancy, and then how we know that our body is ready to get back into it postpartum and how we can do that in a way that is safe for our bodies, but also allows us to have that joy. Because a lot of us who do this type of exercise really need it for our own mental health and for our kind of well-being. So we're going to focus on that today's podcast, but why don't we start off by you telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to get you where you are today?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today. These are my favorite things to talk about. So, yeah, my name is Karlie. I live in Seattle, Washington. I'm a sports chiropractor. I have a practice here called Seattle Sports Chiropractic. I'm also a strength and conditioning specialist, a CrossFit level 2 coach, a postpartum athleticism coach, and I do a lot of speaking on pregnancy, postpartum fitness, rehab, that sort of thing. So I also co-founded a company called Jen Keri, which focuses on creating activewear for women in the postpartum phase. And probably my most important job is I'm the mother of two boys, almost 3 years old and 4 months old. So that's my quick about me.
A relatively freshy. You look very well rested. For those
Oh,
of us who can see her on video, she does not look like she's got a 4-month-old in the
the coffee. It's probably
her coffee. Maybe had a shower today,
the
or maybe not. Dry shampoo. Awesome. Well,
oh,
thank you, Karlie. Really appreciate you coming and chatting. And this is not only part of what you do, but also relatively fresh in your mind because not only do you do it professionally, but you've just come through it personally as well. Why don't we start a little bit about what kind of activities are we talking about? Now, probably we can generalize this to many, but let's focus in on that more, the area that you really specialize in.
yeah, sure. So I specialize mainly in like the CrossFit athlete, the high intensity interval athlete, weightlifting, powerlifting, those kind of athletes, and just people who like to strength train, go to the gym, do their kind of circuits, lifting workouts too. So the main thing I like to always start with is whatever you're doing before, we know whatever you're doing before pregnancy, you can keep doing during pregnancy. And there's always just modifications to that. And there's just infinite ways to modify things so that women can keep doing what they love, like you said, for not only the physical well being, but also the mental well being. And so there's some simple things that I always start with is basically, that first trimester, not a whole lot is changing physically that you need to modify for. Obviously, there's a lot changing as far as like how tired you are, how sick you feel, all nauseous, all that stuff. So that's the number one thing I have people modify for in that first trimester is your energy level and how really you're feeling like sick wise. There's
Bring a
not a whole
bucket
lot.
with you to the gym.
Yeah, exactly. And I always just remind people that it's not worth it to kill yourself trying to get your workout in. It's much better if you need that rest during that time to take that time and give yourself some grace and rest because really during pregnancy, we know we're not making any huge gains in our fitness level, right? We're just trying to hold on to what we got, keep some good cardiovascular work in there, keep some strength, especially around the pelvis and the glutes and the core. But other than that, that's where we start. When we get into the second trimester, that's where I really start making modifications. And if we're talking about the CrossFit athlete, the weightlifting athlete, here's when we start to talk about eliminating some of the exercises that can just be sort of, when you look at a cost benefit analysis, they're just not necessarily worth it, right? There's a modification you can do to get the same outcome. And so that's where we start making changes. And mainly that's starting to eliminate sit ups, any flexion of the core, modifying with sometimes even modifying planks. Some women can keep holding tension through their abdominal muscles, some women can't. So that's where it's important to start with either, I think, a physio or a sports chiropractor, someone that can really evaluate how your abdominal muscles are working. And if you're getting any coning from the diastasis recti, that separation of the abs, especially in subsequent pregnancy, that starts earlier and earlier. So we want to look for that.
Yeah, it really does start earlier and earlier, right? When
Yes.
our bodies have already been stretched to the max in the first time, it just goes into that a little bit more second time. Not to be scared about, but to be aware of. So excellent point.
Yeah. And that's the other thing I try to always remind people is those changes are really normal. They're natural. They have to happen. That separation of the abdominal wall, of course, it has to happen there. It has to grow a baby in there. So I always just try to remind people not to be scared, not to be, there's a lot of fear mongering on the internet, especially I think on social media about that separation and what can happen. But I just remind people all we're trying to do is eliminate the chance that it's going to be harder to rehab later. Doing these things is not going to hurt your baby. It's not even going to hurt you, really. They don't notice that coning lots of times, but it just might make it harder for us to rehab afterwards and to rebuild the core.
Yeah, and everybody does get diastasis through pregnancy. It may not be till the end. Most people recover very well from it. It's those people who aren't able to recover well from the diastasis that go on to have issues, and we'll chat a bit about that in the postpartum phase around how to do that. But you're 100% right. This is something that happens to every single body. You may not notice it, but it does. So just being aware of that and not doing anything to aggravate it, I guess.
I remember in my first pregnancy, I'm like always teaching about this, working with women. And I was like, oh, I don't think I have it. Even though the studies show up to 100%, some studies show at 35 weeks, women have it. But what happens is the skin gets so stretched and so you can't really feel it on yourself. And then as soon as the baby comes out, you're like, ooh, there it is. So I always just remind people, even if you can't feel it, which you probably can't because everything is just stretched so taut, that it's still there and we're still like just trying to modify for
Yeah. So modifying some of that core activity. So
that.
you're not engaging those, what I call the up and down six pack muscles, but certainly we can still engage those wraparound muscles. And really important, like we said before, that core strength piece, that pelvic stability piece is really important.
Yeah. And what I like to remind people of is we think of those rectus abdominis, those up and down ab muscles that we all have, whether you can see them or not, they're there. But really, the core is made up of the diaphragm, the pelvic floor, and then all the muscles that wrap around, right? So we think of it as a barrel. And it is really important. I get a lot of questions about this if women should be doing core work during pregnancy. And the answer is for sure 100% yes. It's just we want to make sure they're not doing those sort of flexy, crunchy exercises. So some of my favorites are like a Palloff press, if people are familiar with that, sort of a band you attach to a door or pole, and then you hold that at your sternum and you press out. And that's going to work your internal, external obliques and do that anti-rotational. So that's working some of those other muscles. And the other one I really like to remind people to work on is the glutes are also connected to the pelvic floor, obviously. And so that's one we often forget about. And then the low back muscles. And it gets hard to work on those low back muscles because you can't be on the floor doing a Superman. That's one of the best, easiest ways that I find to teach people. But you can actually use a stability ball or some, if you're going to a gym, some gyms have, what do they call it? Like an extension bench that you can go on and just hold your body basically in a straight line out from that. And that really works your low back muscles well too. And when we think about pregnancy, we talk about pregnancy, we have to remember that as those ligaments, everything is stretching from the relaxin. What really holds us stable is our muscles. And so we have to be sure to work those muscles all around the pelvis, all around the core, through the hips, because that's what's going to keep you stable. And I can't tell you how many patients come into my office with pain, pelvic pain, low back pain. And once we get those muscles working, they actually feel much better. And it seems like a little counterintuitive, but if you think about it, that's what's stabilizing you. So that's one thing that I think is important for people to know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's huge. We talk about that for any musculoskeletal kind of injury is stabling the muscles around the joint helps to stabilize the joint. And pregnancy is this huge musculoskeletal, hate to say it, injury or strain, right? And so we need to really work on that strength in an appropriate way. And that's when having somebody to guide you through some of these, even just to show you how to do the exercises and then give you a plan is really important so that we don't do things inappropriately and therefore cause even more challenge. So having somebody to guide you through those, if you're not familiar with them yourself, is really important piece.
For sure.
Hey, Sarah, do you know what I've never asked you? Did you take a prenatal course when you were pregnant?
We did. Even though I'm a maternity care provider, my husband and I thought it would be an important process for us to go through together.
That's so cute. It must have been so hard for you guys to coordinate your busy schedules, though.
Oh, tell me about it. I was a medical resident at the time, and he was working full-time. We really struggled to find a course that would fit our needs and ended up doing a semi-private course that still was challenging to schedule and quite expensive.
Wouldn't it have been nice for you guys to have access to an online course with evidence-based content that you could do from the comfort of your own home or on your own time at your own pace?
You're telling me. If I had had access to something like our Pregnancy to Parenthood Prenatal Masterclass, it would have been a game changer.
And that's the big reason we put this course together, to provide parents with access to reliable, comprehensive prenatal education from the comfort of their own homes and the ability to watch it and re-watch it when and where they choose.
Plus, it's got so much great information about preparing for the fourth trimester, which I'll admit, I felt really unprepared for. We focus so much on labor and birth when we're pregnant without understanding how challenging breastfeeding in the fourth trimester can be.
I hear ya. And that's why we put together such a comprehensive module all about what to expect for the fourth trimester and for your newborn.
If any of you listeners are pregnant and thinking about a prenatal course, I may be biased, but I would 100% recommend our online course. Head on over to www.shefoundhealth.ca/masterclass to check it out.
We promise you won't be disappointed or your money back.
So second trimester, and then we hit third trimester. Everything's bigger. The relaxin is all shifty. Your doctor's being like, don't Valsalva too hard. So I always get a bit nervous. There's no huge evidence around it, but I always get a bit nervous with those people who are doing like big weights and using huge Valsalvas. So I'm just tell them to kind of back off maybe by 10 or 15%. Just your maintenance. This is not gaining. This is maintenance phase. But what are your kind of advice around that third trimester piece?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you on that. I always recommend throughout the end of second into the third trimester, you're not lifting more than 70 to 80% of your max. I like to say that you're not ever one rep maxing during pregnancy, or you're never PRing, I should say. But if you just started weightlifting, there's potential you could PR. But in general, we're not trying to set any PRs, personal records. So there's a few things I have people modify just for safety and for comfort, obviously. Box jumps, we usually switch to step ups. That seems like a smart choice for a variety of reasons. Rope climbs, those go in the second trimester for my athletes that I work with. You don't want to fall off a rope, right? And then one thing people don't think about is the feet. So that's for that reason, I often will, not only because of pelvic floor issues, but I'll have people switch out from running, usually in that third trimester. We have to remember the relaxin is working on every joint in the body. And so the feet, that's where you start talking about getting the spreading of the feet, getting bigger, and people just, there's more weight too. They weigh more. And so our feet take a beating. So if people are having foot pain or pelvic pain with running, that one goes. There's just so many good options to bike or row or walk. Even hill walking is amazing during pregnancy and in postpartum, just to get your heart up.
Yeah.
And
Pool running's a good one too, right? Takes the
Well,
weight
yes.
off, but you're still
Yeah.
getting a bit of that resistance. So if you're a
Totally.
runner, then that might be a nice transition for you as well.
Yeah.
And you're often hot, right? So the pool will cool you down too.
Yeah, exactly. So those are some of the changes we make there. And then that's also when I really have people start working on, okay, let's get you a plan for what's going to happen in the postpartum phase. Because I find, especially if it's their first baby, then they can get things set up so that, because they don't realize how much they're not going to be able to think and remember and do things once that baby comes. So here is some thoracic opening because you're going to probably be sore from either breastfeeding or holding your baby or bottle feeding and being rounded forward. So let's open up that upper back and shoulders. Let's get set with that. Let's get a few good glute core exercises that you can start not immediately postpartum, but fairly soon. And then really teaching about breathing and how their breath affects everything that they do and how their diaphragm has been so crammed up there for at least 5 to 6 of the 9 months. And most women lose some endurance in their diaphragm. So it's really important to start learning how to belly breathe again, not breathing up into those accessory muscles in the neck, and then using their breath as part of the rehab piece to help restabilize their core, diastasis, all that stuff.
Yeah, I had a conversation yesterday with a patient of mine talking about that, just using breath. And it's such a simple thing, but it can be so effective, especially in those first few weeks while you're just trying to re engage your muscles, allow them to settle down from this 9 month stretch that they've had and this kind of birth and musculoskeletal injury. But it's such an amazing tool to use to start retraining and re engaging your pelvics, your
Yeah.
core, your diaphragm, as you said. And it's such a simple thing you can do throughout the day if you need to, and a great exercise to start with.
Yeah, you can start. I have women start in the hospital still doing breathing exercises. I used to be so like, I don't know, before I had kids, I guess, a little like woo about breathing. I'm like, come on, we all breathe. But when you start looking at the anatomy, you look at what's called the way that we breathe is called piston breathing, right? So as our diaphragm goes down, our pelvic floor goes down. As it comes up, our pelvic floor goes up, and they move together in that way. Once you start learning that, you can use that to your benefits and you can learn how to really stabilize and reintegrate that transverse abdominis, which gets so super stretched during pregnancy. And you just feel it. You feel the difference once you've had a baby and you can't get that full breath that you used to have. And so I turned a big corner after having my first son of like, all right, it's no more woo woo. This is the real deal. And this is where you have to start. And it's slow and it's boring, but it really is the thing that I've seen one of the biggest benefits for women in postpartum is doing those breathing exercises early on.
And the other thing about those breathing exercises, we're talking woo woo, but this is good evidence, is
Yeah.
that we've got two nervous systems, right? We've got our sympathetic, our fight and flight, our anxiety. Have a newborn. I don't know what I'm doing. They're not sleeping. I'm exhausted. I don't know. Anxiety, that's sympathetic. And then there's the parasympathetic. That's that calming. That's that relaxation. And what happens when we have those deep belly breaths is we activate that parasympathetic nervous system. Now that's that relaxation. So not only are you engaging your core and starting to do a little bit of a rehab, but you're also going to improve your mental health and your ability to cope with all of these changes that come, right?
Yeah. So
So it's
many things.
a brilliant exercise, that
Yeah.
breathing. So how do you help guide people? I always struggle with this. Okay. So I just would say, okay, go see your pelvic physio,
Yeah.
or go see your sports chiro. Like, how do you guide people in terms of like, when are they ready to start back? Because everybody's different. Every body is different and every birth experience is different, right? So some
Mhm.
people have had an elective cesarean section, which still pregnancy puts pressure on your pelvic floor. It still gets stretched out. All your anatomy is changing. You've now had a major surgery. Some people have, a quote unquote, I'm using my quotes, normal vaginal delivery with a little bit of a tearing or not much. Others have had a vacuum or forceps or had a more significant tear. And so, how do you help guide people in their journey of getting back to that fitness that they love to do? And the fitness, that CrossFit, that strength training is often a lot of Valsalva core really need that well engaged pelvic floor, especially to stabilize. And
Mhm.
I'm going to say it, not pee your pants. So, how do you help guide people along that journey? What's your kind of advice to them?
Yeah, this is as with anything in the pregnancy world, it depends, right? Like you said, there's so many variations. Actually, during COVID, I created an 8-week online postpartum rehab program. The reason was essentially people weren't coming into the office that needed this rehab. And it was what I used with my patients mostly. And it's what I created during my pregnancy. I had bought a plan that was similar. And then I was modifying it so much with my own exercises that pretty soon I was like, okay, this is not even what I started out as. And so I created that, which I think for a lot of women, they need something like that, especially when you're talking about people who are trying to get back to not even like professional athletes, but I have worked with quite a few high level CrossFitters, but just back to being in the gym. And it really depends on how the person operates. So some people want what I created, which is like 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week. Here is your quote unquote, again, workout, even though it's just rehab stuff. Some people want to take that 20 minutes and split it up throughout the day so they can like not feel like, I got to set aside workout time. They can do a set of belly breathing right when the baby naps. They can do a set of glute bridges when they hand the baby to their partner. They can split it up. And so I always advise women, first of all, do check in with yourself of what's going to make you feel more like yourself, right? So is it having that set aside workout time? For me, I really want like that's my time. For some people, it's no, I need to fit it in throughout the day. So those are a couple pieces that I have people look. And then from there, I always recommend getting help. So whether, like you said, it's with a pelvic floor PT, I love our pelvic floor PTs. They're starting to be more utilized here, but not nearly as well as in other countries where it just comes with your birthing plan. I work closely with them or someone like me who can help with the rehab side of things and just getting some advice. And so you're not just feeling like you're winging it. That's really the main thing. And the other thing is we have that 6-week check-in. I always like to remind people they don't need to wait to that 6 weeks to be doing breathing, basic rehab stuff. Like you can get a lot out of doing some of those smaller things, those before 6 weeks if you want. But I also, again, you have to check in with yourself. Or are you the kind of person that is, I just need this time to figure things out, be with my baby? That's great too. I still think you should be doing breathing exercises. But there's all these pieces of who you are. And that's why I like people to start thinking about that while they're still pregnant so they can game plan moving forward and have at least a little bit of an idea about where they'd like to go in postpartum.
It's funny you're saying your program that you created, right? Like 20 minutes 4 times a week. I bet you anybody who's pregnant with their first baby are probably like 20 minutes 4 times a week. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? That's easy. Like I'll be able to do that. No problem.
Yeah. Maybe not.
We often talk about getting some time to yourself, right? Like creating a plan to get some time to yourself after the baby. And we're like, okay, even 5 minutes flipping through a magazine. That's great. If you can get that in a day, that's amazing, right? Or 5 minutes that you go and read something or you sit and have a coffee and look outside for 5 minutes. That's a great goal, right? So like 20 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have all of these other new things coming, it can be a lot. And it depends on everybody's situation, right? Do you have a supportive partner who's willing to help out? Or are you a single parent or essentially a single parent because your partner is always off working or is not necessarily the most supportive? And so really, you're right. I think that preparation is key. Thinking about that in the third trimester is what do I need to help me be me and starting to pull in your resources, your support team around you to get that, right? Because maybe you can
Yeah.
have somebody come over for 20 minutes to snuggle your baby so you can go and do your exercise.
Right.
That's great.
And I think when you think about it, like you're doing rehab, like you went through arguably the most athletic event you're ever going to go through and potentially most traumatic to your body. So taking 20 minutes to rehab that, I think when you hopefully for a lot of people, if you explain it to your partner, to a friend, like many people I think would be happy to help with that. And as the baby gets a little bit older, I found you can get them in a bouncer. A lot of this stuff starts on the floor, right? So they can be on the floor with you doing some like dead bug type of thing, some foam rolling, that kind of stuff. So there's lots of ways, but I think for what I've seen is planning before the baby comes. Obviously, like best laid plans, right? Who knows? But at least you have an idea of, okay, here's what I want. And then you can figure out with reality what that looks like.
Yeah. And I think a lot of things that we can do, talking about those dead bugs, you can do those dead bugs with your baby on your chest. They do their tummy time and you're doing
Yeah.
your dead bugs. And so you can incorporate sometimes, and your kids get older, you're then setting a really good example for them of how to do self-care and be healthy and stay fit and all that type of stuff. I know whenever I'm exercising, my kids get down and do it with me, right? And
We love
we
it.
have competitions. They always kick my butt on push-up competitions. But whatever. But yeah, so I think figuring out how you can incorporate some of that stuff, even if you don't have that capacity to ask to get extra help, you can do some of this stuff anyways with your baby.
Mhm.
So
For sure.
cool. Awesome. And then once you've done that rehab, getting back into the gym, are there any like major things that you see over and over in terms of issues or modifications or things that people get really frustrated with that you have to guide them through?
Yeah, sure. So the first is just trying to get back too quick. And I think that's the most important thing is the high level athletes are not back in the gym lifting weight at 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks postpartum. They're not. It's the people who like don't do the research, don't understand the rehab and don't really see the long game that jump back in too quick and then they pay the price, right? So I always just recommend slower is better. Slow and steady wins the race, and just progressing slowly along that. And another obviously problem that we encounter is, and this is why I started my sports bra company, is the bra situation, right? So you need a supportive bra. You don't realize even during pregnancy how big your breasts might really get. And for me, we made the sports bra that we have. It has no clips, buttons, Velcro, that sort of thing. So it just looks like a normal sports bra. And that was really important to me because I couldn't find that bra when I was postpartum. And I just wanted the time for me going back to the CrossFit gym, 1 hour with the class, just feeling like the athlete that I was with the rest of the class, just regular Joes. I didn't want the big nursing clips declaring to everyone I'm a new mom. I didn't want those digging into me when I'm lifting weights, fearing that they'd pop open, that sort of thing. So, anyways, that's why we created that. But I do think it's the problem that needs to be solved and thought about because if you don't have support, there can be other problems with your breast and pain and that sort of thing. But B, we just need as many things as we can to empower ourselves to feel like ourselves during that time because there's just so much of our body and our life that doesn't feel like it's ours anymore. So having that little bit of time, maybe that one little thing, even if it's a sports bra that makes you feel more confident, that's what I think is really important and just empowering women to feel like themselves in that postpartum phase. They're still who they were before they had the baby.
Awesome. Karlie, where can people find you if they're interested in either coming to see you or learning more about these amazing sports bras that you've created?
Yeah, thanks. So on Instagram and also our website is Jen and Keri. It's Jen and Keri. Neither of my partners' names or I are Jen or Keri, but we're named Jess and Karlie, and everyone always gets our name wrong. So we figure that those are our like pseudo fun mom names. Got all the good mom info for you. And then also Dr. Karlie, I think on Instagram, and then karliekazi.com is my website. So between those places, you can basically find everything you ever wanted to know about me and everything I do.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put that stuff in the show notes below. Karlie, thank you so much for coming on and congrats on your little one and your toddler. And hopefully that's all going reasonably well for you.
The
And
chaos.
are you back at the gym 4 months postpartum?
I am, yeah. I did my own rehab plan. I did that for 8 weeks. And then, yeah, we have a pretty good home gym setup that I use and try to get in 4 or 5 times a week. And it definitely looks different, right, than what it did before I had kids. But you'd be surprised what you can fit into 45 minutes or an hour once you have 2 littles running around and that's all you got. So I'm working at it too.
You learn to be very efficient. That is for sure. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.